Erev Tov, everyone. And it is Monday night. It is 8 p.m. or 7 p.m. or something like that. Here on the east side of the United States, here in the diaspora, this is the House of Seven Beggars. Therefore, it must be Zeyde Story Corner. That's right, Zayde's Story Corner. So, we're going to pick up. We weren't on last week. Nothing's a little busy. Yeah, we were a little busy last week, so we didn't have the chance to do the show. So we are back today. So check in the chat room. We have Kelsey Lynn, Shoshi, and probably Shlomo, Marshall, Donald, Veronica Port, Miles, and Mason. So good to have you all here with us this evening. We are going to pick up where we left off about the king and the fisherman. Yeah, about the king's daughter and the other king's son and the fisherman and so on and so forth. So we should probably get to our. Well, let's get you on your camera first. Hopefully, it's going to behave this evening. Yeah, we shall see if it is going to actually work this evening or not. It was acting a little funny earlier, but we shall see. Okay, so if you remember, the last time we were together, we were doing the story about the princess from the Polish king and who got kidnapped, and the son of the German king and his friend the fisherman who went to find her, and they went to look for her, and they find a rabbi who tell them how to find her, and they go look. So that is where we left off. We shall go back maybe a couple of paragraphs and get everybody caught up, and then we start the rest of the story, okay? Okay, so here we go. The fisherman's son climbed on the horse and shut his eyes, then felt himself flying with the speed of the wind. Finally, the horse came to stop beside a hut. The youth dismounted. Through the window of the hut, he saw the princess tied to a bed, while a red-hot oven glowed. And he saw a witch getting ready to throw the princess into the fiery oven. Without a moment's thought, he leapt into the room and so surprised the witch that he was able to kill her very quickly with his sword. He flung the witch's body out of the hut, and it tumbled down to the mountain and fell at the feet of the young prince, who was waiting there. The prince thought that it was the king's daughter, and that the fisherman's son had killed her. He grabbed the body, mounted his horse, and flew like the wind back to the Polish king. And that is where we left off. Okay, so let us move the camera a little bit. There we go, that's better. That's much better. Thank you very much. You're very welcome. Okay, so we start again with the story. Since the bloody corpse was unrecognizable, everyone believed the German prince. So the Polish king sent a troop of soldiers off to find the fisherman's son and take vengeance for the death of his daughter. Meanwhile, the fisherman's son untied the Polish princess and rode with her, and the rabbi, remember there was a rabbi in there, rode with her and the rabbi toward her father's castle. As they approached it, they saw a troop of soldiers coming to meet them. The rabbi said to the fisherman's son, "The German king's son must have accused you of killing the princess." When the soldiers surrounded him, the fisherman's son revealed the princess to them and shouted, "This is the real princess." And when the princess's face was washed, everyone could see that he told the truth. The German king's son said, "She belongs to us both, because we both searched for her." So it was decided that all three of them would lie in the same bed that night. And in the morning, the princess would marry the youth whom she was found to be facing. That evening, there was a great banquet to celebrate the return of the king's lost daughter. Everyone ate and drank deeply. Everyone but the fisherman's son, who took various good things and put them into his pockets. When night fell, both youths and the princess went to sleep in one bed. The scent of chocolate and the other sweet things he had in his pockets wafted from the fisherman's son. But the German king's son gave off a fearful smell of drunkenness. Finally, the princess couldn't stand it and turned her face toward the sweet-smelling fisherman's son. And when the morning came, she was found pressed close against him, facing him. And so they were married. And the German king's son was killed because he had tried to kill the fisherman's son. Okay. And that's the end of that story, eh? Okay, we are going to go on to our next story. I see Stephen has joined us. Good to see you, Stephen. Okay, this is called The Magic Fish and the Wishing Ring. Once upon a time, there was a childless king. Above everything, he wanted to beget a child who would rule his kingdom when he was gone. But neither doctors nor magicians had been able to help him. The king heard of a certain rare fish in such and such a river, and any woman who ate even a morsel of this fish would conceive a child. He sent at once for the royal fisherman and gave him 4 weeks to catch it. "If you bring me the fish, I will make you viceroy," the king said. "But if you fail, I will have you beheaded." The royal fisherman went to the river eagerly, for he too was childless. And oh, what a catching of fish there was! At first he caught a big fish, and then a little ones. And each time he caught a fish, he examined it closely, but it was never the one he sought. At the end of 2 weeks, he was catching no more fish, only worms and more worms. 3 and then 4 weeks were up, and there was not even a worm left in the river. The fisherman was desperate when he suddenly heard a great splash. Turning, he saw a man standing in the water holding a live fish. "Here's what you are looking for," said the man, who of course was Satan. I'll let you have it on condition that when he is 13 years old, you'll give me the boy your wife will conceive after she has eaten some of this fish." Without hesitation, the fisherman pledged to give the boy over. Then, carrying the fish, he hurried to the king. There was a great banquet where the fish was served, and at which the king appointed the fisherman as the viceroy. And all of the women who ate the fish and whose husbands came to them that night did conceive children. 9 months later, the queen gave birth to a daughter, while the viceroy's wife gave birth to a son. The two children were raised together and startled everyone with their learning and talent. When they were not yet grown, they became engaged, and it was generally agreed that after the king died, the two of them would rule the kingdom. But the viceroy, the former fisherman, remembered what he had promised the men in the river and grew sadder in the years. One day, when his son was 12, the boy said, "Father, what is troubling you? Don't spare me. I can endure it." So the viceroy revealed the truth about his pledge. "So be it, if it is my destiny," the boy said calmly. "But get me a boat, father, and leave the rest to me." When the day came and they were to separate, they went together to the river bank. And the son stepped into the boat his father had provided. Then the viceroy called out, "Satan, take what is yours and grant that I have fulfilled my pledge." With a great splash, Satan appeared. He acknowledged that the pledge had been met and turned to snatch the boy. But the son was such a skilled helmsman that he eluded Satan. They began to chase near and far down the river and out into the ocean. The Satan almost, but never quite, catching the boy. At last, Satan, exhausted, sped after the boat and sent it scudding across the sea to the edge of the world. The vessel was cast upon the shore of a river, where the viceroy's son stepped out. For 3 days he wandered. On the 4th day, he came to a large city. He went into various houses, but they were all empty. He concluded then that there must be a council meeting in the king's court, and he walked down the main avenue until he came to the royal palace. Here, too, nobody was to be seen. He looked about, and his eyes fell upon a tablet inscribed with these words: "Just as east may not meet west, just so it is impossible that here a human can appear. And yet, should one, by some strange luck, find his way here, then let him knock 3 times with a hammer. On the anvil he'll find in the large third chamber. Well, the viceroy's son followed the instructions. After the third blow on the anvil, a crowd of people seemed to start up out of the ground. They all filed by and bowed to him, crying, "Greetings to our liberator!" When the queen came by, she explained that the people had, in the course of a war, been bewitched by their enemy and condemned to live underground. But now that he had broken the spell, he would be crowned king of this land. And a few days later, that's exactly what happened. He became king of the people he had freed. And in time, he married their former queen, and thus made her queen again. He ruled happily for a long time. But then he began to think, "What have I got here? A king's throne? I could have had that at home. I would have married the princess and become a king. And I would have brought happiness to my parents in the bargain." And it struck him too that the people at home must be mourning for him. The queen noticed his unhappiness and said, "What makes you so gloomy?" He told her, and she said, "If you really want to see your family and friends, I can arrange it." "Here," she said, giving him a ring. "You have only to put it on and say, 'Take me to the land of my birth,' and it will take you there at once. But once there, you must tell no one about our country. If you do, dreadful things will happen to you." "I promise," he said. And with that, he put the ring and gave the order, "Take me to the land of my birth." Away he flew, and in an instant he was at home. Everyone was so glad to see him that a holiday was declared, during which the viceroy's son got so drunk that he forgot his promise to the queen. "In that other country," he bragged, "my wife is so beautiful that if you were to see her, your eyes would be dazzled. And not only my wife, my cook, if she were here, would be the most beautiful woman in the land." The king said, "Brag away, talk is cheap. How do we know that you're telling the truth?" "You want proof?" said the viceroy's son. "I'll give you proof." With that, he put the ring on his finger and cried, "Bring me my wife and my cook." And there, standing in the doorway of the banquet hall, stood his wife and his cook from that other country, and their beauty did indeed dazzle the people. No one, including her husband, noticed the displeasure behind the queen's smile. A day or two later, the viceroy's son was strolling in the countryside with his wife and cook, At the grassy knoll they sat down to rest, and the two women poured a glass of wine for him. The young man, expecting no evil, drank and fell instantly into a deep sleep. That must be some good wine, eh? Then the queen and the cook took away his clothes, the magic ring, and all signs of his identity, leaving him sleeping on the grass. They disappeared forever. When he woke, he saw what had happened. He was too ashamed to go back into town. A kindly peasant gave him some old clothes, and for a year or two he wandered from town to town. One day he was traveling through a forest. He came upon three foolish brothers quarreling over an inheritance that consisted of a saddle that could seat 7 people, a whip that could lash out of its own accord, and a piece of cloth that could make anyone invisible. "Why don't you let me help you?" the young man said. "Give me the saddle, the whip, and the cloth, and I'll divide them in a way that will please you all." "Very well," said the 3 fools, and gave him their inheritance. He seated himself in the saddle and, seizing the whip, cried, "Hey, brothers, can you see me?" "Yes," they replied. "In that case," he shouted, "saddle, carry me home. Whip, strike. Cloth, cover me." The whip struck at the brothers. The cloth made him invisible, and away he went. He was back in his hometown. There he wrapped the saddle and the whip in the cloth and walked about. Great crowds of people thronged in the streets. The viceroy's son stopped a passer-by and asked, "What's going on here? Where are you from?" "Why, the smallest child in town knows that the old king and queen are dead, and we're having a wedding to crown a new king today. Our queen was to have married the viceroy's son, but he disappeared." When the viceroy's son heard this, he wrapped himself in the magic cloth and went at once to the coronation. The queen appeared leading her husband-to-be, who was about to be crowned, when the invisible viceroy's son cried to the whip, "Whip, give him 50 lashes!" Before everyone's eyes, the whip set and beating the would-be king. Then the viceroy's son cried, "On, whip! Give the queen 50 strokes!" And the whip turned on the queen, who wept and begged, "Whoever is beating me, please show yourself." The viceroy's son threw off the magic cloak, and the queen exclaimed, "It's him! He is the true king!" and fell to the ground in a faint. When she recovered, she and the viceroy's son were married, and he was crowned king with great joy on all sides. Interesting story, huh? Okay. We go on to our next story. The Hunchbacks and the Dancing Demons. Well, that should be interesting just from the title alone, eh? There were a couple of hunchbacked brothers who lived in the same village, but they did not always get along. They were always mocking each other, quarreling, making each other's lives miserable. But you could cheer either one of them by telling him that the other's hump was bigger. One of the brothers was meaner and more spiteful than the other. At last, the other, feeling that his bad-tempered brother was shortening his days, decided to leave the village. He gathered together such rags as he had, an old shirt, a pair of trousers, some scraps of cloth for his feet. He put them in a sack. With the sack over his humped shoulder and a stick in his hand, he started off one morning at dawn. He traveled from village to village, from town to town, from city to city. He wandered to the woods, over the fields, till one day he was forced by bad weather to spend the night in an open field. He was lonely there all by himself, but what else could he do? Then, in the distance, he saw the protruding tip of a roof. He walked towards it and found that it was an abandoned hut. So he went inside. It had a broken down bed with a bit of littered straw for a mattress. And putting his sack down, he flung himself on it and went to sleep. Toward midnight, he was awakened by a loud noise. Opening his eyes, he saw a crowd of carousing demons making a great racket. As they beat a drum and danced about, they struck out with their tongues, squealed, whistled, and howled. All at once, they came upon the hunchback. They hauled him out of the bed and made him join their circle. He danced about with a will, making the same strange cries, and this pleased them very much. Everyone danced until it was almost 1 o'clock in the morning. And the neighbor downstairs was pounding on the roof saying, "What's the matter with you? I've got to be up at 7 o'clock in the morning." Not really, but I thought I would throw that in. Okay. Then the chief of the demons said, "You're a great fellow. We'd like you to visit us again. And to make sure you will come back, we want you to leave us a pledge." The hunchback offered them his shirt and trousers, but they said, "No, we don't want them." He offered his sack, but still they said, "No." "What can I give you?" he asked. "I haven't got anything else except my hump." "That's it!" cried the chief of the demons. "Your hump? Now, that's undamaged goods. There's a pledge we can accept." Then all the demons formed a circle around the hunchback. Though when he looked around a moment later, nobody was there. And not only were the demons gone, but when the hunchback touched his shoulder, he found that his hump was gone too. And that's where we are going to pause for right now. We are going to take our 6-minute break. And when we come back, we shall find out what happened to the hump. So stay tuned.
Let's Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
It's intermission time, folks, so hurry, hurry, hurry. Step right over to our refreshment center for the most extravagant array of refreshment goodies ever assembled under one roof. Enjoy breathtaking, mouth-watering goodies, everything from a snack to a delicious full meal. At our refreshment center, you'll find a large variety of goodies to satisfy your hunger, your thirst, or your sweet tooth. So hurry, hurry, hurry. Visit our refreshment center now. The show starts in 5 minutes. The show starts in 4 minutes. The show starts in 3 minutes. The show starts in 2 minutes. show starts in 1 minute. And now, on with the show.
And we are back just as promised. Okay, let's find out what happens to the hump, huh? Okay, here we go. The former hunchback, his head held high and his shoulders thrown back, strolled through the streets of his village. He was met by his mean-tempered brother, who looked him over and said, "Where have you left your hump?" The other described all that had happened. The hut, and the demons, and the dancing, and that, he concluded, is how I got rid of the hump. "Where's that hump?" said the hunchback, asking eagerly. His brother provided instructions to which paths and trails to take, and the hunchback started off. He walked on and on. At last he came to the hut. There he found the bed littered with straw, just as his brother described it. He too went to sleep. Just at 12 o'clock, the demons arrived and began to dance. There were the same strange cries, the drumming and whistling and tapping of feet, just as he had been told. This time, too, the demons took the hunchback into their circle, and he danced along with them, matching their cries. They were delighted with him. A few minutes before 1 o'clock, when their carousing was ended, the chief demon said, "You're an honorable fellow. You kept your word and came back to us. So now we want to return your pledge." And with that, he gave the other demon a signal, and they formed a circle around the mean hunchback. And when they found that he already had a hump on his back, they struck the pledged hump on his chest. So now he has two. Oh, such a lucky guy, huh? Okay. 2 humps are better than 1, huh? Okay. This story is called The Princess of the Third Pumpkin. That's what it says. Okay, we shall find out about the pumpkin. Once upon a time, there were a king and queen who had an only son, which is quite unusual because back then most of the kings and queens didn't have any children. I don't know why, but every one of these stories, the king and queen don't have any children until something happens. But anyway, when he was 18 years old, they sent for him and said, "Dear son, it's time for you to be married." And the son replied, If you find a bride for me, I'll gladly marry." The king ordered the most beautiful maidens in the country to be brought before the prince. But the young man was not pleased with any of them. So the king proclaimed that anyone who could procure a bride for his son would be richly rewarded. An old woman came to the palace and said, "Lord King, I have a maiden for you who is unique in all the world." "Let's see her," said the king. The old woman said, "Let the prince get up at dawn. Let him put on his coat and take his knife and a bottle of water, and let him go to the king's garden. There he will see 3 pumpkins growing on a single vine. Let him take the knife and cut one off. The most beautiful princess in the world will emerge from it. Let him give her water to drink, and she will at once be willing to be his bride." Well, the king thanked her and commanded that she be given a place in a little hut in the courtyard that was near the royal kitchen. Then the king called his son and told him what he had to do to get a bride. Now, most guys just go out and date, until they find somebody. But, whether you go get it from a pumpkin or whatever. The prince followed the king's instructions. He got up at dawn and put on his coat. He took along his knife and a bottle of water and went into the royal garden. There he saw 3 pumpkins growing on a single vine. He took his knife and cut one off. A naked princess, as lovely as the sunrise, stepped out of the pumpkin and cried, "A drink, a drink, a drink!" But the princess escaped before the prince could give her water from his bottle. So he cut a second pumpkin from the vine. And again, a beautiful naked princess stepped out. She cried, "Oh, a drink, a drink, a drink!" Before the prince could give her water, she escaped. This guy's having no luck at all, man. He needs a wingman. So the prince cut the 3rd pumpkin from the vine, and from it stepped a naked princess, uniquely beautiful in all the world, who cried, "Oh, a drink, a drink, a drink!" And the prince quickly put his bottle to her lips, and she drank her full and stayed. The prince took off his coat and wrapped the princess in it. Then he set her on the branch of a tree and started off to tell the king that he had found a bride. Meanwhile, the princess sat on the branch of the tree. Now, the branch overhung a well, and a gypsy woman came to it for water. She looked into the water and cried, "Oh, how lovely I am!" The princess on the branch cried, "A curse on you! You? Lovely? It is I who am lovely." The gypsy looked up and saw the princess sitting in the tree. So she dragged her out of it, took the coat, threw her into the well, after which she donned the princess's coat and perched herself on the tree. And now the joyful king and queen came running and looked up at the bride. Oh my, a gypsy, they thought. But they pitied the prince and said nothing to him. They sent for clothes and had the gypsy dressed and taken to the palace. And the gypsy, with her spells, made the prince believe that she was the beautiful princess, and preparations began for the wedding. On one day, the king's cook went to the well to get a pail of water. As he pulled it up, he saw a golden fish swimming in the pail. He took it to the kitchen to cook it, but he threw the scales outside. Now, the old woman who lived in the hut near the royal kitchen looked out and happened to see the scales. She gathered them up, sewed them together, and made a little shoe. She hung it up on the wall of her hut before she went to bed that night. When she woke in the morning, she was astonished to see that the hut had been tidied. Her breakfast had been cooked. Her bread was already baked. She sat down to spin flax. She spun and spun until she fell asleep. When she woke, she discovered that all her flax had been spun. She was curious to know who was helping her, so she decided to stay up all night and find out. She got into bed, she closed her eyes, and pretended to be asleep. Late at night, she opened her eyes and saw a princess, lovely as the world, come out of the golden shoe. The princess heated the oven, baked the bread, and tidied the hut. The old woman got silently out of her bed and stole over to the wall. She snatched the golden shoe and flung it into the fire. The princess, seeing this, set up a clamor, but it was too late. The little golden shoe had burned up, and the princess had to stay with the old woman. One day the princess said, "I'm very bored. Give me some work to do." So the old woman went to the king and said, "I'm very bored. Give me some work to do." So the king gave her some thread and told her to crochet a tablecloth out of it. The old woman took the thread back to her hut and gave it to the princess, who sat down and crocheted a tablecloth in the design of a garden. And in the middle of the garden, she crocheted a portrait of her own face. The old woman took the tablecloth to the king, who liked it so much that he had it placed on the table at the banquet for the prince and his wife. As the company sat eating and drinking and having a pleasant time, the prince looked at the tablecloth and saw the picture of the garden and the princess's portrait. "Who crocheted this tablecloth?" he asked. The king said, "The old woman who lives in the hut near the kitchen." The prince commanded that she be brought at once. The old woman came, and the prince said, "Was it you who crocheted this tablecloth?" "No," she replied, "not I, but the princess of the golden shoe." The prince ordered her to bring the princess, so the old woman went home and came back leading her. The prince instantly recognized his betrothed, uniquely beautiful in all the world. He fell on her neck and wept, and he embraced and kissed her. The gypsy bride, the false princess, was driven out of the palace. And the prince and the princess were married and continue to live happily until this day. So that's a nice story, huh? Okay. Now we go on to the next story. This story called The Orphan Boy Who Won the Bride. Can you guess how this starts? I bet you can. We talked about this many times. Once upon a time, there was a man who lived in a nobleman's domain. The man and his wife had been childless for many years, so he went to the rabbi in the nearby town and said, "Rabbi, my wife and I want a son. Won't you pray for us and ask the Lord to bless us?" The rabbi said, "Yes, I will." So he prayed to the Lord, and his prayers were answered. The man's wife became pregnant and bore a son. Of course, the overjoyed parents invited the rabbi to the circumcision feast. When the boy was 5 years old, his parents decided that there was no one to care for him. His parents died, and there was no one to care for him. So the nobleman took the child into his own home and raised him himself. The boy, eager to make himself useful, learned how to build things. Using a saw and a plane and a hatchet, he made sleds and wagons. Several years went by in this way, and by the time he was 12 years old, he had quite forgotten how to speak Yiddish. One night, the boy's father appeared to the rabbi in a dream and said, "Rabbi, my son no longer knows what he is. Take him away from the nobleman and instruct him in Judaism." The very next day, the rabbi went to the nobleman and pleaded for the boy to be given to him, but the nobleman refused. Well, one way or another, the rabbi got the boy away from the nobleman and took him to raise and instruct him. He taught him the rites of Judaism, when to wash his hands, how to make a bracha over the bread, and so on. When the boy was 17, a letter came inviting the rabbi to a wedding in a distant land. The youth said, "Rabbi, take me with you. I want to go." But the rabbi said, "How can I take you? You don't have the right clothes. You can't go traveling ragged as you are." "Never mind that," replied the youth. "They'll find out who I am soon enough." The rabbi said, "You can't come. I haven't enough money for both of us." Then off he went on a ship, leaving the youth behind. And guess what? That is where we are going to pause. You know how much I love a cliffhanger, huh? Okay, so don't forget, come back next week and we'll finish the story, eh? Okay. Now don't forget, on Wednesday night, is the Torah study with Rabbi A and Rabbi Reuven. And of course, on Friday night is Kabbalat and Ma'ariv Shabbat service. And Shabbat morning at 10 a.m. is Shacharit and Musaf. So make sure you come by. And also, don't forget to check out Reb Shlomo's shows too. So he does a lot of stuff. So make sure you go and see his stuff too. Okay, so until the next time, my dear friends, we will simply say, Laila Tov.